Hi everyone, it's Natalie and welcome back to my channel. Today is another romance books I've read recently, quote unquote, video, because these go back to, I don't know, like October or something. Again, we do not talk about it, okay? We do not talk about it. So let's just jump right into these books. So the first book I'm going to be talking about is The Awakening by Carla Nicole. This is the third book in the Lore and Lust trilogy. In the series, we essentially follow, I don't even know how to describe it because this third book is like related to the first two, but not quite the same because we're following a new couple. In this one, we're following two side characters. One of them is a doctor, a human doctor for all we know, and the other one is a vampire who is like crushing on him or whatever. And so it's the romance that develops between the two of them. I rated this, what did I rate this? Probably like 4 stars. I probably gave this 4 stars because even though there was the crime of peanut butter, I will get to that. Even though there was that crime, I think overall I still enjoyed this. Let me look for it. Yes, I indeed gave this 4 stars. Now, let's get into the crime of peanut butter because I need to get that off of my chest before I can talk positively about this book, because this author described the protagonist, the vampire protagonist, twice as peanut butter. Why? I need to understand. The first time it was to talk about the color of his skin, and this is a Black author. Let's start with there. This is a Black author. I dislike all of her descriptions of people because she has a food obsession, and I'm like, you're a Black woman, you should know better. But we're not even going to talk about it in the context of describing people as food. We're going to talk about it within the context of what on earth made her think that peanut butter what's a good description? It's not sexy. It's not appealing. It's not... You can enjoy peanut butter, but you do not associate peanut butter with anything remotely attractive. So I'm just confused. So like once she describes his skin as peanut butter, the color of peanut butter, and then she kind of describes him as a person as peanut butter, like the movements of his body. Honestly, the star that this book lost was entirely because of the peanut butter crimes. Crimes. Jail for Carla Nicole, because that was unacceptable. Unacceptable. And I don't know who she has as trusted people who read her books before she publishes them, but they are also going into jail. They are also going to jail because the fact that they allowed those crimes to exist in the published book, jail. Anyway, apart from that, I genuinely enjoyed this book. It was longer than the first 2 books in the series, and it did feel that way. It did feel longer. And thinking about it within the fact that I don't know why it was written not just as a companion, but as an integral part of the series. Again, I was just confused by some of the choices, but overall, if I look at it just as its own story, I really enjoyed it, and I really liked the romance between the characters because there was a lot of tension, there was a lot of conflict, and there was a lot of trauma that both of them had to resolve in order to commit themselves to this relationship. So overall, I would highly recommend this series. I just don't feel like as a whole it's as cohesive as I would have liked it to be, but in general, I think it's an enjoyable series. But the first one is still my favorite, for sure, 100%. The next book I read, which was more of a novella, was Deal with the Demon by Chase Verity. So in this book, we follow this, I can't remember if they identify as a woman or not anymore, or is it the demon that doesn't identify with a specific gender? I don't know. But in essence, there's a person ends up accidentally making a deal with a demon because they are very down in their luck. They're really struggling to find a job that will pay them enough to maintain, their family healthy, eating happily, everything, all of that. So they accidentally make this deal with a demon. And so the demon comes to their house and essentially becomes a glorified nanny. And it's a romance between both of them. This was so delightful. I rated it 4 stars. It was so enjoyable. Honestly, I picked it up on a whim because it was free and it was Halloween, and I was like, you know what? This is the moment. This is what I need in my life. And so I read it in one sitting. It was so much fun. It was funny. It was sweet, and it just served everything I wanted it to serve. Like, when I pick up a monster romance, I want absurdity, I want fun, I want to have a few chuckles. And this was exactly that, while at the same time serving just the most domestic fluff you can imagine. What a delight, what a moment. Would highly recommend it. The next book I read was The Ex Hex by Erin Sterling. Now, I'm going to read the summary because clearly I have been summarizing these books terribly, so I might as well just commit to the reading summaries life. 9 years ago, Vivian Jones nursed her broken heart like any young witch would. Vodka, weepy music, bubble baths, and a curse on the horrible boyfriend. Sure, Vivi knows she shouldn't use her magic this way, but with only an orchard hayride scented candle on hand, she isn't worried it will cause him anything more than a bad hair day or two. That is until Reese Penhallow, descendant of the town's ancestors, breaker of hearts, and annoyingly just as gorgeous as he always was, returns to Gravesglen, Georgia. What should be a quick trip to recharge the town's ley lines and make an appearance at the annual fall festival turns disastrously wrong. With one calamity after another striking Reese, Vivi realizes her silly little Ex Hex may not have been so harmless after all. So I gave this 3 stars. This was incredibly enjoyable in the moment, compulsively readable, but ultimately, like that video, I'm not even sure I'll be able to insert it, but it's like an animal who's really excited to eat some cotton candy and then puts it in water and completely dissolves. That is this book. Like, after you're done with it, it disintegrates, it disappears, it no longer takes up any real estate in your mind, essentially. So would I recommend it? I would still say yeah, but definitely only in the spooky season, because it's definitely very well placed within the spooky vibes. And in general, I do think that for what it is, it has a pretty well developed plot. It's engaging. You want to follow the threads being, spun, but ultimately, it's not really memorable. The romance between the characters is meh. And then the smutty scenes are not really that steamy at all, which works for some people, but not for me. So overall, I'm not unhappy that I read this, but I will probably never think about it again now that I have made this video. The next book I'm going to be talking about is A Girl Like Her by Talia Hibbert. This is the first book in the Ravenswood series. I think that it's called. So let me read the summary for y'all. In Ruth Kaba's world, comic books are king, silence is golden, and human contact is a pesky distraction. She doesn't like people, which works out just fine because the people in the small town don't like her. The exception to that rule? Evan Miller, her way too charming next door neighbor. Ex-military man Evan is all tattooed muscle on the outside and a big, cuddly teddy bear beneath. He's used to coaxing prickly people from their shells, but he's never met a woman quite like Ruth. Blunt, sarcastic, and secretly sad, she's his exact opposite. She's also his deepest desire. Soon, Evan's steady patience and smoldering smiles are melting Ruth's reserve. But when small-town gossip from her past begins to poison her future, she's forced to make a choice. Should she trust Evan completely, or is her heart safest alone? Now, if you have been here for a while, you know that I'm a Talia Hibbert stan. I am obsessed with their books, and I am happily and slowly working my way through them. So for this one, I gave it 4 stars. Now, let me admit that I don't remember super well the book, but let me just admit that I don't remember super well most of the books that I've read in the second half of this year, unless it is Blue Flag or Given. So that's just life. Anyway, so I really enjoyed this romance. Based on my notes, I found the romance between the characters super, super sweet, and I love a grumpy sunshine romance. So having the sunshine guy and the grumpy girl was just delicious. It was delicious. And this one has, like most of their books, has an autistic main character. We love that as well. And just the whole process of seeing Ruth gain confidence, start believing in herself, start defending herself, and basically deciding, like, I am who I am, and if you don't like that, that's like your problem. It's not my problem. Perfection. We love to see it. It was great. As always, I would highly, highly recommend picking up Talia Hibbert's books, because even though they are a bit repetitive, for me, that's comforting, and I like the kind of characters that she writes. I like the character relationships and dynamics that she writes, so it just works for me. Now, the last 2 books I'm going to be talking about, and I may even mention the 3rd book, are Unhinged, Psycho, and Moonstruck by Onley James. Now, in this romance series, we essentially follow this group of brothers who are all psychopaths slash sociopaths, and they were adopted by this doctor who was doing this experiment of trying to raise psychopaths slash sociopaths from a young age to basically, what was the word they used? I don't know, but to basically focus their attention on using violence and harming people, but only those who deserve it. In essence, people who are terrible, who have committed heinous crimes against others, to basically use their violent tendencies to eliminate them, especially when the police doesn't have enough evidence to go after them, but with covert means that would not hold up in court, that kind of thing. So in essence, each story follows as one of the brothers falls into obsession with some person, and you just follow that romance, or more of like that spiral into obsession. Now, I gave the first book 5 stars because I was absolutely swept away by it. I was invested. I was obsessed with the story. I was so into it, even though it was completely ridiculous, completely absurd, completely unhealthy. I was right there living the moment with the characters. So even though it's not my favorite romance in the series, overall, I feel like the sequels I have read have not captured that energy that the first book had. Maybe it's just because the first one was new to me, completely fresh eyes for it. But regardless, I would actually say that the romance in the second book, which is Psycho, is one of my favorites, because August and Lucas are precious. I love them. I am obsessed with them. And the smut, y'all, in that. I learned some things I did not need to learn about myself. Okay? Let's just say that what I like about vampires transfers too well to content that has nothing to do with vampires. Let's just leave it at that. Let's leave it at that. And then I am in the middle of the third book. I'm like 60% into it, and I have not yet decided if I'm even going to finish it. And that is because Onley James has committed a crime against me, has committed violence against me. And so even though I literally read book 1 and book 2, each one in like a day or two, it has taken me, by now I think we're going towards a week to read the third one, because the author keeps mentioning this side plot that is driving me up the wall. So some of you might consider this spoilers. So if you are looking forward to reading this series, maybe don't listen to this, but I would consider it a trigger warning. So that's all I'm going to say. So 1, 2, 3. So what keeps being mentioned in this third book that takes me out of the story is that one of the adoptive sons of the doctor has a thing for the doctor, and apparently it is reciprocated, but in like an angsty way, like the doctor knows it's bad or whatever and doesn't want to feel the way that he feels. They keep mentioning that, and it literally makes me want to rip out my eyeballs. I cannot deal with that. I cannot deal with the incest stuff. I cannot deal with the age gap of meeting a child when they are a teenager and later down the line wanting to fuck that child. No. Unacceptable. Literally, this is one of the reasons I stopped reading an author I really enjoyed, because he also enjoyed doing this. And I'm like, stop. Just stop. Full stop. Full stop. Anyway, let us return. So, the rest of my thoughts on this third book that I haven't finished yet is that the smut is also excellent. Peak. Like literally, the problem I have with this book is that the smut is so good, but then that plot line, that side plot line comes up again, and I feel like the author has thrown a bucket of cold water onto my body. How am I supposed to enjoy that? I don't enjoy it. I don't. So, only time will tell if I will actually finish this third book. The completionist in me wants to, but then I'm also not planning on continuing the series, because if I have to read about that side plot line one more time in another book, I'm going to scream. So I'm contemplating just cutting my losses and moving on with my life. We shall see. Anyway, so yeah, that's it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you would like to follow me on any of my social media, I will have the links to that down below in the description. But for now, see you next time.